Today, we're going to get into one of the most romanticized and, let's be honest, brutal realities in the business world: the anatomy of student startup failure.
You know the story, right? It's basically a modern legend. The brilliant student hunched over a laptop in some cluttered dorm room, fueled by cheap pizza and pure ambition, coding the next thing that's going to change the world. We're talking about the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Bill Gateses. They created this incredibly powerful image of the dorm room billionaire.
But what if that celebrated image, the one that fuels all those university pitch competitions and innovation hubs, what if it doesn't really match up with reality? What if it's more of a myth than a model to follow? Because this number, 90%, this is the number that really governs the entire startup world. That's the overall failure rate for new businesses. It is a stark, sobering figure. And, for student founders, the story behind this number is actually even more complicated. So to really understand what's going on, we first have to look at when these failures happen. See, that 90% isn't like a single event. It's more like a long, drawn-out battle for survival against something called the mortality curve. Now, here's what's so interesting. Look at where the danger really peaks. It is not in the first year. The real test, the so-called startup valley of death, hits between years 3 and 5. This is when over half of all startups just disappear. And for student founders, that low failure rate in year 1 is incredibly deceptive. Why? Well, because they're often propped up by the university. Free office space, maybe some grant money, even classmates working for pizza. The real test, when market reality sets in, hits right after graduation, which you'll notice lines up perfectly with that deadly 3 to 5 year window. And look at where students often choose to compete, these really exciting, high volatility sectors. But just look at these numbers. Crowdfunded hardware, a staggering 97% failure rate. Consumer mobile apps, the success rate is practically 0. From fintech to IT, these aren't just risky, they're statistical kill zones. And all of this brings us to the core conflict for pretty much every student founder. It's a paradox: the massive ambition and fresh ideas they have on one side versus the profound lack of real-world experience on the other. Okay, this table is incredibly revealing. A first-time founder, which is what a student is by default, has about an 18% chance of success. But look at this next line. Someone who has founded a company and failed actually has a higher success rate the next time around. Experience, even the experience of failing, is more valuable than having no experience at all. So let's put these two CEOs side by side. The student CEO has passion, fresh ideas, for sure, but the liabilities are huge. No tacit knowledge, that's the stuff you can't learn in a book, like how to handle a crisis, and a limited network of friends who are just as inexperienced. The serial founder, on the other hand, brings a whole network for capital and talent that can be the difference between life and death for a company. And here's a problem that is almost unique to students: the part-time CEO dilemma. A startup demands 100% of your focus all the time, but a student has to balance that with exams, with classes, with a thesis. In a market where speed is everything, that divided focus can be a totally fatal flaw. Now, you'd probably think the university support system is there to solve these problems, but here's a really counterintuitive idea. Sometimes, that very support system can become a trap. It can become a cage that actually hides you from reality. This leads to a phenomenon that researchers have given a brilliant name: the zombie startup. It's a perfect metaphor. This is a company that's technically alive, it has a name, it has a website, but there's no pulse, no growth, no employees. It's just kept on life support by these small university grants and incubator perps. And just how common is this? Well, a huge study by BYU and the University of Utah found that nearly 40%, that's 4 out of 10, of all university-licensed startups were these zombie companies. They exist to make the university's stats look good, not to build a real business. All they do is delay the valuable lesson of failure. And the difference really comes down to incubators versus accelerators. See, university incubators are designed for student learning. They're nurturing. But private accelerators, think Y Combinator, they're designed for one thing: getting a return on their investment. Their high-pressure, super selective environment forces you to either grow fast or fail fast, which is a much stronger signal to future investors. So what's the ultimate cause of death for these startups? Most people think it's running out of cash, but it's not. The number one reason startups fail, accounting for 42% of all cases, is that they build something nobody actually wants. For students, this often comes from what you might call campus myopia. solving a problem that only exists inside that university bubble. All right, so after all this bleak data, you might be wondering where the upside is. The key is to stop seeing failure as the end of the story and start seeing it for what it really is, a very expensive but absolutely essential part of a founder's education. This data from the investor Bill Gross just sums it up perfectly. He found that the number one factor for a startup success is timing. Number two is the team and execution. The idea itself, it comes in a distant third. And the irony is, students are brilliant at the least important part, the idea, but they are structurally weak at the two things that matter the most. So what this means is the goal shouldn't be to avoid failure at all costs. The goal should be to have a good failure. So what does that look like? Well, first, it happens fast, so you don't waste years of your life. Second, it costs very little, ideally funded by grants, not your own debt. And most importantly, it leaves you with a stronger network and a powerful lesson that you can take to your next venture. And that really brings us to the core message of this whole explainer. The statistics, yeah, they're daunting, but they aren't a death sentence. For a student founder, the real failure isn't the company that closes its doors. The real tragedy is going through that entire experience and failing to learn the lesson it was meant to teach you.